Good morning, you lovely bunch. Oh, hang on, sorry. Sorry, I didn't mean to give a Dave Noakes style introduction there. I am just very, very happy to be out on the bike today. It's 20 degrees, the sun is shining, and I'm in a short sleeve jersey. Oh, life can't get much better than this. But that said, today's ride is going to be a fairly sedate one, and for good reason. If you saw my recent video where I took part in the Suffolk Classic Sportive that was 72 miles long, but decided to ride 29 miles to the start line, you'll know that I really struggled quite badly to complete that 100-mile route. So given that in about 5 weeks' time, I'm going to be riding back-to-back 100-mile days as I ride from Essex to Paris, I thought I'd better do something about my fitness. So the Zone 2 training starts today, and I thought I'd bring you along for the ride to give you a few tips to help you out if you wanted to do the same. But first off, what is Zone 2? Well, Zone 2 refers to a level of exercise that pushes your heart rate to around 60 to 70% of your max heart rate, or a rate of exertion of around 3 to 4 on a scale of 10. It's a sweet spot where you could comfortably ride along with a friend while still holding a conversation without having to take big, gaspy breaths. For that reason, it can sometimes also be called all-day pace or conversational pace, because in theory, it should be a speed at which you can ride, well, all day. Now, your max heart rate will depend on a number of factors. Obvious ones like how fit you already are, but also some more obscure ones like how tall you are and even your gender, because generally speaking, shorter people will have a higher heart rate, which is why women generally will have higher heart rates. So because your max heart rate is so personal to you, it naturally follows that it's likely going to be different to anyone else. To take that to an extreme example, Zone 2 for someone like Tadej Pogacar, or any other World Tour pro for that matter, would probably be somewhere like Zone 5 or 6 for us mere mortals. And it's for that reason that I prefer to do Zone 2 rides on my own. Not only does that stop the pace creeping up past what you're aiming for, but it also stops those naturally competitive tendencies creeping in, because let's be honest, we all set an imaginary line at some point in the distance at the top of a climb that we all want to beat our friends up to, and all of a sudden you're no longer in Zone 2. So my first non-tip tip is try riding alone, at least for the first couple of rides, until you get your eye in and you know exactly what Zone 2 is and what sort of pace you should be cycling at. So where can you do Zone 2 training? Well, like me right now, you can do it outside on your bike, or just as easily inside on a turbo trainer, which arguably is going to make your heart rate more consistent because you won't have any of those pesky hills or other terrain to put up with. Like this one I'm on now, I'm at 162 BPM. Yeah, this ain't Zone 2 training. However, unless you're using some kind of training program like Zwift, for instance, then you're going to find that sitting, spinning your legs and staring at a blank wall is going to get pretty boring pretty quickly, and it's going to put you off training completely. But I want to make this Zone 2 training video as accessible as possible, and while I'm completing a 4-week workout on Zwift at the moment, I realise that not everybody has access to that. Which is why I'm doing this ride in the great outdoors. So that's what Zone 2 is. But what do I mean by max heart rate, and how do you figure out what yours is? Well, simply put, your max heart rate is the maximum number of beats per minute that your heart can pump under maximum stress. So that'll be as you're really pushing yourself up your local nemesis climb, or when you're race sprinting to the finish line. Working out your max heart rate can be a little bit more difficult than simply defining what it is though. However, for the average rider, you can use a simple calculation of 220 minus your age. So for me, at 42, my max heart rate should be around 178 beats per minute. Now again, that's not a complete scientific method, but it will get you close enough, especially for Zone 2 training. So once you've worked out your max heart rate, your Zone 2 rides should aim to push you no harder than about 60 to 70% of that. So for me, with a max heart rate of 178, I want to be looking at about 106 to 124 BPM. Now bear in mind that if your fitness level has dropped recently, which is why you're doing the Zone 2 training, or maybe you've put on a little bit of weight, and I'm just as guilty of that at the moment, but if that is the case, then you might find that your heart rate creeps up a lot quicker than it ordinarily would do once you've developed a little bit of fitness. So keep a close eye on that heart rate to make sure that you don't push yourself very quickly out of zone 2. Now, measuring your heart rate is very simple if you're wearing a heart rate monitor connected to a bike computer or something like Strava on a smartphone. But if you don't have any of those things, then you can use an old tried and tested method called rate of perceived effort, or RPE. Now, like heart rate zones, RPE also has zones from 1 to 10, and for zone 2 training you want to be sat at about RPE 3 to 4. Now again, this just means that you're going at a comfortable pace where you can have a conversation easily without having to stop and take big breaths. Zone 2 rides aren't just about going slow though, they're about being smart with your training, and if you can do that, there are a number of great benefits to be had. Spending time in zone 2 teaches your body to use fat as a primary fuel source. When you ride in this zone, you're effectively teaching your muscles to be more efficient at using oxygen and fat for energy. This spares precious and limited glycogen for when you really need it, like climbing up that hill or sprinting the last 300 meters to the calf to beat your mates there. By consistently training in zone 2, you're improving your aerobic capacity. That means your cardiovascular system becomes more efficient at delivering oxygen to your muscles, allowing you to sustain higher power outputs for longer duration without accumulating fatigue as quickly. It's like you're upgrading your engine to run smoother and faster. Win-win. Finally, not only are zone 2 rides good for endurance, they're good for aiding recovery. After a particularly hard workout, a gentle spin in zone 2 helps to increase blood flow to the muscles, which helps flush out waste products like lactic acid, and that helps you recover quickly and stops the dreaded delayed onset muscle soreness, or DOMS for short. You know, that feeling after you've done a big heavy ride or maybe a weight session and you can't quite walk up or down the stairs properly without holding onto the banister. Yeah, that's not fun. This is why you'll often see pros finish a 200-kilometer race and immediately jump on a static bike to do a gentle spin of the legs. Think of zone 2 as a therapeutic massage that will help you bounce back stronger and quicker for your next ride. Okay, so you're sold on zone 2 training, but how do you actually do it? Well, let's talk tips and strategy to get the most out of your training sessions. Consistency is the key with zone 2 training. Aim to do 2 to 3 training sessions per week, increasing the duration as your fitness improves. And remember, it's the cumulative effect of these rides over time that lead to significant gains in endurance and efficiency. So it's much better to spread out some shorter rides across the week than one long ride at the weekend. When riding in zone 2, it's so important to maintain a steady effort level the whole way through the ride. Avoid that competitive temptation to push it too hard on the climbs or accelerate too hard on the flats. And that's why zone 2 riding is best done by yourself or with someone else who's going to match your training schedule. Try to find a rhythm that allows you to comfortably breathe and hold a conversation as you go. If you find yourself gasping for air or struggling to complete full sentences, the chances are you've pushed yourself into a higher intensity zone. This is much easier to figure out if you're wearing a heart rate monitor, but using the RPE method is a great free way of doing the same thing. As I said earlier, you want to try and be able to hold a conversation. However, if you're riding on your own like I am, then talking to yourself, as strange as that sounds, or maybe quietly singing to yourself, will help you know just how hard you're pushing. That will let you know whether you need to back off the pace slightly or push it a little harder, depending on how your breathing, talking, and maybe singing is going. Ultimately, it's all about listening to your body and acting accordingly. You need to pay close attention to your posture and cadence on the bike. Cadence is the amount of times you make a full rotation of your pedals in 1 minute. You want to be aiming for about 80 to 90 RPM, as this is generally considered the most efficient cadence for most cyclists. However, if you don't have power pedals or a power crank on your bike to tell you just how fast you're spinning your legs, then a simple way to calculate this is by counting how many times your cranks turn in 6 seconds and then timesing that by 10. Once you've done this a few times, you'll naturally get a feel for what 80 to 90 RPM feels like, and you won't need to count anymore. As well as that, try to maintain a relaxed but engaged upper body position, keeping your shoulders down and back and your core stable. This helps to reduce unnecessary strain on your joints and muscles, allowing you to ride for longer and more comfortably. Finally, mix it up a bit. Don't be afraid to change up your routes, terrain and scenery to stop that dreaded boredom creeping in. So those are my Zone 2 training tips to increase your fitness and endurance. But the most important thing to remember is that it's all about discipline and patience. It may not be as exciting as hammering up that hill or sprinting for the finish line, but it does work, and I need all the help I can get to get to Paris without passing out. So there we go, just over 19 miles done, an hour and 35 minutes with an average speed of just over 12 miles an hour. It may not be fast, it may not be exciting, but it absolutely works. So if you found that useful and interesting, and I hope you did, please consider liking, commenting and subscribing if you haven't already. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.
Turn up, let's go.